Hunter for obvious reasons, centred around Newcastle, but pretty much centred around what we do in terms of military industry in support of the ADF in our region. So what does the Hunter Defence Task Force do? We represent about 100 companies in the Hunter region, both primes and SMEs. So think BAE, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, those big Australian, if you like, franchises of US military companies, as well as a very significant SME base in support of what happens essentially in a military industry sense in the region. So as the chair, the way we structure this is, we don't necessarily talk directly to the companies on a monthly basis, but what we do as we form this task force that's HunterNet, Business Hunter, ICN, Aiden, AI Group, University of Newcastle, Hunter TAFE, the airport up there, Master Builders Association, because we build a lot of stuff as well, and we meet on a monthly basis to look at what are the opportunities that are coming out of the investment plan, which is what we buy for the ADF effectively, and what does that mean for local industry and Australian industry content. So that's really our role. We review that stuff pretty much on a monthly basis, and we form clusters to bid for particular projects or help SMEs essentially come in as subbies for the major primes or bid directly to the ADF. So my role as the chair, and I'm ex-Air Force, flew for 30 years in the Royal Australian Air Force. So I look at government and the bigger primes and I talk to them essentially about the value proposition of what we have as an industry base in the region. And at an SME level, we've been funded over the last 2 years to the tune of, $1.5–2 million by the federal government to run a thing called the Defence Readiness Seminar Series online. So it's an online series that says to companies, particularly SMEs for obvious reasons, if you want to participate in the defence space and contract, these are the things you need to have your ducks in line with, like quality management capability, DISP, your security requirements, your cyber requirements, even basic things like doing BD in defence, somewhat different to the commercial sort of environment. So that's essentially what we do. Now, when I say represent 100 companies, there are probably 4 key things in this region, and the reason I'm here is I want to include you all in this, that are centred primarily around RAAF Base Williamtown. So the 4 things are, we support pretty much the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, in terms of its through-life support. Second, the Hawk, which is our lead-in fighter trainer. So how do we support BAE systems with subcontracting support for that? Missile integration and missile production. I can't go into a lot of detail right at the moment here, but there's a lot of work going on in terms of missile production in that part of the world. And finally, a thing called battle space management, which is how we coordinate a recognised air and surface picture for the ADF, effectively, and they build it out of Williamtown. So the Air Force is sort of set up into force element groups, we call them, which is sort of like the fighting groups, and the 2 primary ones are Air Combat Group, and as the name implies, F-35, Super Hornet, Growler, which is the suppression of aircraft, and the Hawk, and the PC-21. So they own that, and Surveillance and Response Group owns everything from the E-7 Wedgetail, if you've flown out of Williamtown, overhead systems, radars and all that stuff, and the P-8, which is the Maritime Patrol Aircraft. And in a previous life, I was the commander of that group. So the front end, I suppose, the fighting end of the Royal Australian Air Force exists there at a headquarters level, and a lot of the squadrons and all that sort of stuff that sits there. So clearly, there's a significant attraction for the major primes to come there. There's probably about $4.5 billion worth of projects coming to that region, not only in aerospace, but in land and in the maritime domain, as well as cyber and as well as space, coming into this region to be delivered to the ADF that's come out of the Defence Strategic Review, the investment plan that ties to that, and you'll hear some of that in this year's budget and obviously next year's budget. So my job really is to make sure that the SME base in our region, and I want to include you all in that, is qualified and also has the ability to pitch for particular contracts. As I said, either as a subby to the primes or directly to defence. So that's really what our role is. We attend all of the national shows like the Avalon Air Show, Indo-Pacific, which is maritime and land forces, but we also do a lot of external stuff internationally. Like I just got back from the Singapore Air Show, and we win contracts for companies in the Hunter at those export shows. So there's quite a lot that we can do to help industry if you've got a capability. And the only way I know if you've got a capability is you've got to tell us, effectively. You can have a look online. We have a Hunter Defence website. It's hunterdefence.org.au rather than .com, but have a look at that. It's being restructured, but what we tend to do is we have what events we're going to run, the forums we run, but also a capability matrix that says, here's the capability of industry in our region, all right? And if you've heard of quad charts, that's essentially what we pitch up and put on our capability matrix. And the bigger primes and defence tend to look at that website and look at what the capability is of the companies. And we don't tend to just do everything in the Hunter. You know, a lot of companies have reach all over Australia and internationally, as I said. So the main reason to come here was to say, we're open, we want you all to come and talk to us if we can help you. That's essentially it. And you don't have to necessarily be only in defence. You can have commercial capability that you think might have some applicability. Talk to us about it. You may have a foot in both camps, or you might be, you know, a direct defence company. But, you know, frankly, it's the Lockheeds and the Boeings of the world that are in that sort of game. So that's really sort of what we do